Hello, comrades. I always wanted to say that at a Marxism festival. I'm so honored and blessed to be here, and thank you for the SWP for inviting me. It's truly humbling, and I'm so proud as an Egyptian and to come to London and speak about the revolution, and especially as a revolutionary socialist, and as someone who took part in it and experienced the full journey of it. I want to just start by saying that I never doubted the revolution. I never had doubt, even at times when it was so difficult to continue, when it was almost discouraging, and you put yourself at risk all the time, and you see nothing happening. But it was that belief that this is a stepping stone in a long-term strategy towards the revolution. I knew that maybe I wouldn't experience it in my lifetime. Like, I've seen people that have mobilized for decades and have seen nothing. But that was important, and this is part of the reasons and really what kept me going. I'd like to start by just giving you a little bit of a history, or a kind of a why and how this revolution came about, and then I'll go into during Tahrir Square experience, the 18 days, and then reflect on what's been happening since then and the transitional period. The Western media especially American media, have focused so much on calling it an internet revolution, and this goes back to what Alex was saying. It undermines completely the struggle, and it's being done deliberately. They're calling it a face revolution, a spontaneous thing that just started on the January of the 25th, but the reality is this revolution has been a long time coming, for years and years and decades, but especially since 2000 with the Second Palestinian Intifada, that we saw for the first time people taking to the streets after a decade of really not mobilizing in such a way, in solidarity, anti-imperialist sentiment in Tahrir Square and many universities, and people really mobilized for the Palestinian solidarity. Then you have a wave of this anti-war with the US invasion of Iraq that also kicked up the momentum in the street, and people protesting and demonstrating and calling out, drawing the links between Mubarak and Sharon and the US and this whole imperialist capitalist agenda. With the birth of Kifaya in 2004, that was the setup for the first multi-candidate presidential election that we had in 2005, that was calling for anti-Mubarak regime, end of Mubarak regime, and not to further the power to his son, Gamal Mubarak. That was faced with brutal, force by the police, of course. I mean, cattling and arrests and use of thugs. So that wasn't anything different that we've seen in Tahrir this year, but this is a systematic way of how the state security plays with the NDP and the elite to protect their interests, using thugs alongside with state security. State security is just thugs wearing uniform, but it's the same thing, basically. And you can tell from those years that the privatization, economic privatization, and those structural adjustment agreements that were done back in the 70s and 80s and 90s were viciously being implemented. Lots of privatization of businesses and major sectors, working sectors in society, and land and so on, and that was definitely starting to affect the working class. And we had a spring up of waves of demonstrations and strikes starting in Mahalla in 2006, which inspired a lot of other factories to go on strikes, demanding the same demands that Mahalla were demanding. And those demands weren't just wages and pensions and unionization and so on, but they were also against the mini Mubaraks that they had in their institutions and their factories. And then we had the 2008 Mahalla Intifada, which was, if you've witnessed that or read about it or seen any pictures, it was basically a replica or a mini revolution of what we've seen in 2011 with our 25th of January revolution. The workers had called for a strike. The strike never took place because Central Security offices occupied the textile mill in Mahalla, which is the biggest textile mill in the Middle East. It's about 27,000 workers, and it was actually greater than that, and it was cut down throughout the years because of the layoffs and the privatization policies that took place. This inspired a lot of people, and it was hailed as a great intifada that a lot of groups actually started based on this Mahalla Intifada, which part of it is the April 6th youth movement that was so inspired by the Mahalla uprising and started mobilizing in their own way. But all along this, there's definitely the revolutionary socialists that had close ties with workers in key factories like Mahalla, like Helwan, like Suez. And we always, even though we're not a lot in Egypt as revolutionary socialists, but we're definitely impactful in our connection and the web that we have with the workers. 2010 was the highest record Egypt have ever experienced in strikes, protests, stands, you name it, across all Egypt. Parliament Road was our Hyde Park. It was people with tents there for months and demanding whether wages or their company got sold, that they didn't get what they were promised. Legal cases. I mean, you name it. Everything that was possible within the working class, they were there in Parliament Road all. The summer of 2009 and 2010. But also on the political ground, there was a lot happening. There was the completely viciously rigged elections that I wouldn't even call elections. They were just a circus. People went to the polls and the boxes were already filled, they were already full of the ballots, And there are videos, hilarious videos. They're just checking this Mubarak, sitting voting for everybody. Even the dead were voting. It was awesome. But also we had cases of, very famous cases of police torturing citizens that ended up in death, like the young man Khalid Saeed. That was a catalyst also, because it really mobilized a lot of youth that saw themselves that we're all Khalid Saeed. Wait a minute, under the emergency law we can all be Khalid Saeed, we can all be captured, tortured, beaten to death. And the youth movements and all of the oppositional force really took that and made a lot of videos and pictures. So it was out in the public. That made a lot of people that weren't involved politically to start mobilizing and getting angry, getting really angry. Things were heading to a threshold that was about to be broken at any time. So you've got, the political corruption, the economic corruption, the high prices, inflation hit the roof. We had the kilo of tomato last year was 10 pounds. And if you're living on 100 or 200 pounds, a family living on 100 or 200 pounds, imagine how can you make it, even through a week, let alone a month. So it's definitely hard time and lots of boiling and brewing. There was a lot of mobilization on minimum wage. There was a court case that was, the left really organized well with the only independent union, with the real estate tax collectors, about 55,000 workers. We called for minimum wage to be 1,200, which would put an average worker at the poverty line. So we're not even asking for something crazy. And you get the really disparity in this whole minimum wage issue, because you get ministers that get paid maybe $1 million or 100,000 a month, and then you get a worker who gets paid 99 pounds a month. So this gap is humongous. The case was won by the workers to have a minimum wage set, but that was never implemented. And this is the problem in Egypt. Even if you go through the reform way and the gradual and the legal way, you're bound to fail, because after all, this is not in the interest of the ruling party, the business elite, and those men. So right before the January 25th, there was a lot of things happening. So we started with the election, Khaled Said, the elections, completely rigged, and then you have this attack on churches, this permit for a church in Omraniya was rejected to be built, and there was an uprising. 9 people died, the clashes with police, 187 were arrested, and that was in December. And then you got in January, the beginning of the year, we had the Alexandria church bombing. So it was just boiling on a really sensitive issue, and the regime used this divide and rule mechanism when it comes to the Christian and Muslim sectarian divide, really. That doesn't exist between the people, and the regime highlights and keeps on making even more uncomfortable for people in the streets. And then you got Tunisia. Thank you for Tunisia. Because honestly, without Tunisia, they definitely sped the process. I mean, it was heading to the revolution, but maybe it could have taken some longer time if Tunisia hadn't happened. But what Tunisia did is that it made the average people that didn't necessarily believe in the revolution, which were very few, to believe in the process of change through the power of the people, through revolution, through the streets. Because Tunisia, an Arab country, a dictator of, very much similar to Mubarak, and they were capable, by the power of the people, to topple that, to kick the dictator out. And we started mobilizing and organizing as an opposition with all the youth movements and the organized left. We started planning on, okay, we have this police day, it's a holiday, the January 25th, ironically. And we're gonna call for mass demonstrations, not knowing that it would turn into a revolution. But if you were watching closely what happened in Egypt between January 14th and January 25th, you will see that we had five people, they wanted to be Bouazizi. They wanted to start and trigger the revolution. They just didn't know how. But they wanted the revolution. They wanted what the Tunisians had and what the Tunisians did, even to the extent of replicating the trigger, that what happened in Tunisia, that obviously, it didn't necessarily work until the January 25th mass demonstrations that we organized to start from urban poor areas, chanting socio-economic chants that have to do with prices of meat, how the half a meter of Madinti, which is a very wealthy gated community sold for millions of pounds, was sold to this guy, Hisham Talab Mustafa, for half a pound, a meter. And the kilo of meat is 100 pounds. So so these were the chants that got people to come out of their houses and join in these mass demonstrations from the urban poor areas. And we were like, well, if we just reach Tahrir, that would be great. That was the hope, is to reach Tahrir. What would we do when we get to Tahrir? Well, we'll figure that out there. Because we had called so many times for protests in Tahrir that never took place, because it was either closed off or people got arrested before they even get there. And that was the plan, and it worked great. I was in Shobra, and we started maybe like by 100 people. By the time we marched around the area, we were 10,000 people, starting to head to Tahrir. I went to Tahrir. Tahrir was already full, which was the most amazing sight to see. I couldn't stop crying all the time. I couldn't believe myself. I'm used to all these protests of the same 100 to 200 people that go to every single protest. I mean, it's the same people in every single protest. And to see the masses to actually take to the streets, and they were chanting, "الشعب يريد إسقاط النظام," just like the Tunisians. This was not in our plan. I mean, we were like, it's gonna be a day of mass demonstrations, and let's hope for the best. And in Tahrir, something very, very interesting and new happened. You can just feel that the people were empowered by one another, by their collective, by being in Tahrir, chanting all together, standing against the dictator. And they all came from different all different walks out of life, different cities, different age groups, different religions, but they were all united by their collective struggle. And you can just see when the police was pushing on us and firing tear gas and all that, people would run, but then look at one another and run back at the officers. I mean, I saw thousands of people running after police, and I just couldn't believe my eyes. The fear barrier was gone, and everybody was loose, and that was it. We owned Tahrir Square at that moment. And even though the Tahrir Square at that night was cleared by violence, this is when I got a rubber bullet in my back, and that didn't stop people. We would run on the side streets, gather again, chant again, and keep on chanting, and it didn't stop. It did not stop. Once the government started, shutting down Twitter first, so we used the proxy, and then they shut down the internet, so we used cell phones. Then they shut down that. Then we used landlines for the first time. I forgot people's home numbers. Then the word was out already. The word was out that Friday, everybody, mosques, church, then we go out to the streets, and nobody could get in touch with anybody. But you went down to the streets, and every single inch of asphalt in Cairo was filled by someone who hates Mubarak and wants him out. It was that amazing of how many people came out that January 28th, regardless of all the internet and the Facebook and all these things. Because the struggle was there, the determinations and the persistence was there. And nothing was going to stop us. Well, no tear gas, no rubber bullets, no police brutality that we had been facing for the past 3 days. And when the police disappeared, which was really surprising me, I didn't honestly think that they would go out this easy, but it just took 6-7 hours to take out the whole police. It was very surprising. I mean, they were shooting tear gas non-stop, and I knew that they would run out at some point. I mean, they would just have to run out. So we went to Tahrir Square. The army came in, which was kind of feeling weird for me and for a lot of comrades, because we don't trust the army. Maybe the out public, they do, and the fact that the army is a huge part of society. And everybody's in the army. I mean, all the males are subjected to enroll in the army. Subscription. They have to attend. So the army, the people themselves is fine, but the institution, the army institution, we've been ruled by the army since 1952. We definitely knew that this is good, but not so good. We'll see what happens. And the time in Tahrir Square was just the most liberating experience and inspirational thing that I've ever been through. You see people all of a sudden taking their initiatives and organizing and securing the outskirts and making tents and doing all kinds of organization and things that nobody had planned out in advance or said, you're going to do this while I'm going to do this. No, it was just all kind of working together, even though all the people there were from every single, class, religion, age, everything. anything, everything. You would find, an older woman, or a woman with like looking like an elite woman, sitting with a poor guy, sharing a sandwich. It's like these things you've never seen before. So Tahrir Square was just a sample of Egypt, basically, that was so democratic, so free, so liberated, and very self-sustained as well. The day of the thugs on the camels and the horses, that was the lowest point probably in Tahrir. I cried for the first time out of fear that day, when I just felt that everything is being undermined. People bought Mubarak's speech. They started to come out on the street. Not only that, all the thugs that are normally, in protests and in elections are now in Tahrir with weapons. If we didn't hold our grounds that day, it would have been over. And we, as activists and as political opposition, would be the first people out. Like, we knew this is it. We fight, we die, or we live. There's no other option. It was this or that. We fight till freedom. And we held our ground, which was so amazing. We started setting up barricades, chopping down the sidewalk. People knew what to do, which was surprising. I didn't know what to do, but there are the ultras and the Muslim Brotherhood. I would credit them for knowing how to deal with this situation, for sure. And after the day Mubarak stepped down, that was something I'll never forget. I was just finishing a meal, which was my first hot meal of 18 days. And right at a restaurant nearby, and I heard the cheers, and because I knew there was an announcement, but I didn't think of it much, since given the speech that he had made the night before. So I was like, okay, what now? The chair is gonna come and speak, like, get off Mubarak off of me. Like, we didn't think of it much that this announcement would mean something, because it was just going to be something, the same thing that he said the night before, which was so disappointing, and we were so discouraged, and we're like, okay, so now we're going to have to be in Tahrir for the next month or something. And because really, people were not going to leave until he leaves. My family used to call me all the time, so Gigi, what do you think is going to happen? No, seriously, people are not leaving until he leaves. Even if it takes months and months, people were so determined. And if you went to Tahrir Square, you know that by just walking through, you know that people were so determined that they're not going to leave at all. And right after Mubarak stepped down, all the speculation started to happen, all the speculation started to happen, and we didn't know. We knew that now the hard work starts. But the most important fact that the media doesn't really like to highlight is 2 days before Mubarak had stepped down, all the workers that all along have gone on strike, started going on strike from day one, called for a general strike. And that was really hit the elite's pockets, the upper middle class that maybe were okay in the beginning, feeling comfortable with this situation that they could last some time on. But when they went on a general strike and called for a general strike, that put immense pressure on Mubarak to step down. And this is really what toppled the regime, was that working class and that force of the small independent unions that we have that mobilize and we're connected to different sectors, like transportation workers, the workers in Mahalla, of course, the real estate tax collectors, the Halwain, the telecom workers, the sugar factory workers. They all collectively coordinated together and called out for this mass strike. And without that, for sure, it would have been a longer process. But they didn't stop then, which is the most important thing, is that now they're organizing for a federation, a trade union workers federation, that would be alternative to the state corrupted, the stealing machine one, headed by Hussein Mugawar, who is workers all over Egypt are calling for him to be beheaded. And that would be the foundation of the Democratic Workers' Party that I would definitely be so happy to be part of and see exist, because then those so-called social demands, social economic demand, now would be a political weapon. That, you know what, if you don't end emergency law, we're going to go on strike. Then they're going to do it. And this is the force to be reckoned with in Egypt right now. We have a huge working class. We have, they're being organized in a very fast way, and that will be, this is the revolution phase 3, if you want to call it. I mean, now we're at the time where we've taken out the body, we've taken out the head, and we have the body left. And that body is immense and it's entrenched in every sector in society, in every business institution, in every ministry. And to take those, cleanse those institutions out of those corrupted elite and businessmen, it's going to take the working class to do it. And they have to be organized. And this is what we're doing right now. And it's really happening at a fast pace, which is great. On the other hand, what they did on the ground was completely the opposite. They harassed strikers. They arrested them. They tortured peaceful protesters by arrest. And I personally got beaten up on the February 25th when we were striking in front of Prime Minister's office to call for Shafiq's government to step down. The army attacked the group of peaceful protesters, arrested some of them, and even now, some of them are facing 5 years of prison in military court. I mean, this is completely unacceptable. We call for the army to not be the father of this, overlooking this transition. We need a transitional civil government that is formed from the people, by the people, and working for the people, truly representing those demands and those voices, and that would have to be the workers. Every coalition or every thing that they're forming, like the committee to reform the constitution, it has no workers, no women, and no left. Like even the youth coalition doesn't involve any leftist voice. No revolutionary socialist, no socialist party, nothing. And this is problematic, but on the other hand, where we're working and organizing as labor unions, setting up the labor unions, setting up the Labor Democratic Party, and so on, this is where our force is working in parallel with whatever counter-revolution that they're making. Lastly, I'll just, sorry, I know I went too far, but I just want to end on a personal note where, like I said, I never doubted the revolution, even though when it was impossible to believe in it. So I urge you to never lose hope and to never give up in what you believe in, even if the whole world is the opposite from what you believe in, which is the world that we live in today. We live in a capitalist, globalized, imperialist, neoliberal world. And it's hard to be a socialist at this time. But what Egypt did and what Tunisia did, and all the struggles in Yemen and Bahrain and Libya, that proves the power of people and revolution is possible. And we have to continue to mobilize and organize in this, believing in this. So March 26th could be your intifada. Government, you need to take out your Mubarak, and it's something that you have given us. You know, you've taught us through the amazing books that you publish and the knowledge that you spread to us. We're now throwing it back at you. Thank you.